What is up, everyone? Welcome to another tier list video. Today, we're hopping into a new series, a new game. This time, we're going to be doing a review for and a ranking system of the 9 holds Skyrim. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how we're going to do this. I had the idea of this kind of being like a as though we have like stayed at all of these holds and that we're like just a customer of them, but we're also going to include actual like feedback as to what there is to do in it from an actual game perspective as well. So we're going to kind of meld those together. We'll see how that goes. But before we get going, we're going to explain to you the ranking system here. S to D. S is going to be your top tier, your 5-star rating. That's going to be places that not only you want to stay for, a week vacation after a hard year of work, you want to stay a week in one of the 9 holds. Listen, S tier, not only do you want to stay there for a week, you might even move your whole life there. Your humble life as a bard, living across the great continents, and then you decide that you want to come to Skyrim and stay a while. S tier is where you're going to want to stay long term. A tier. A tier is going to be a fun place to be. You might vacation there every couple of years. You're going to spend a little bit of time there. You have some fun times. Maybe you even spend a couple of months there abroad, like studying some kind of particular skill or something that the town has to offer. B tier. B tier Skyrim holds are going to be your places that, maybe there's a lot of good qualities about it, but then again, maybe the weather kind of stinks there, like it's just not that pleasant to be at year round. Maybe there's some times of the months and things like that, some seasons where it could be pleasant. Some seasons it's downright awful. And maybe, you don't always feel safe there. It's subject to things going poorly, and maybe there's just not enough to do there. C tier, going to be not a lot to do there a lot of the time, just below average overall. Nothing really that redeeming about it. Maybe there's a couple of things you can do here or there, pass the time. Maybe it's good for like a 2-day stay or something, but you don't really find that 5-star hotel there, and you just feel like, ah, man, a little bit on the dangerous side. They don't have maybe some protective. You just don't feel safe being there, and the weather stinks basically all the time. But if you get a nice little, place to stay, maybe you can enjoy the weather being poor because you're inside. D tier. This is going to be the place you don't really want to ever go there. Not even for any type of visit, really. You don't feel safe. The weather is intimidating and perhaps even dangerous. And the people aren't that good. There's nothing to do. Without further ado, we are going to get started. Our first place that we are going to be reviewing is Dawnstar. Now, the reason you're going to see me looking over here a little bit is I have my actual names of these. I always spend time looking at these tier lists, by the way, trying to find ones that have good naming on them. You can only read maybe part of 2 of the names underneath them there. You can read Markarth a little bit and a little bit of Morthal. You can't, trust me, I looked, you just can't find people that have made these lists with great iconology on them. But anyway, going back to Dawnstar. Dawnstar is, immediately I'm going to hit you with the first thing that you should note about Dawnstar. The weather, pretty cold. And you're by the water, so like, well, wait, no. I mean, yeah, you have water by you. But here's the thing. It's a little cold, and that's probably going to be a common theme amongst our slightly lower ranked areas. And there's not a whole lot to do in some of these cold places, and you're going to find yourself wondering what you're even there for. And honestly, becoming a Thane, like if you as a Skyrim player, it's kind of one of the more boring locations. There's not a lot to do there. You show up and you're like, hey, Jarl, what's going on? The Jarl's like, yeah, stuff's going on. I don't really care, though. And you're like, okay, well, what do I do, though? And he's like, I don't really care. You're like, oh, well, this is a good time. It's not. And as a civilian, if you're going to stay here, I don't see what brought you there in the first place. Perhaps you were interested in the cold weather and you wanted to see the harsher side, and not even the harshest side, but the harsher side of your Skyrim. I'm going to be honest with you. Dawnstar is going to go into the C tier, and perhaps it could be subject to even lesser ranks. Now, your safety isn't going to be in question except for the cold for the most part. You'll probably be safe living here as long as you stay within the bounds of the town. Probably going to be fine. Bulkreath. Now, first of all, cool crest. If you have any interest in a cool look, Falkreath's little badge here is looking pretty good. And the weather, admittedly, is much better than a lot of these other locations. It's got your mountains in the area. You've got good scenery. You've got a lot of tree coverage. There's going to be a lot of greenery there. But it's kind of small, a little bit compact. You're not going to find a whole lot of activity roaming the streets. From an actual gameplay standpoint, it is pretty fun to go and, do the werewolf stuff, do the hair scene stuff. You're going to get one of your artifacts, your Daedric artifacts, I think. Getting that achievement, by the way, is rough stuff. I had to cheese it real good in order to get that one. But from a player standpoint, there isn't a ton to do, and there's not a ton to offer here. But as a civilian, I think this would be a fun place to stay. So I think that the weather being good, security being more or less good, if you wander into the woods, you might run into a pack of wolves or like a bear here and there. But the threat level here is low. The things to do, probably not super high, so that's going to lower it a bit. But the weather should be good here. You should feel nice just being there. The people are more or less nice. The only thing that might be off-putting to you as just a regular person is the overall focus on the dead. Like they like their graveyard, and you might feel a little awkward about that, or perhaps you're from a culture that embraces the dead. Don't take that in the wrong context, but you celebrate the dead. You have a great deal of respect for it, and these guys are going to be your prime example of that. I think that Falkreath is an A tier place to stay, but it cannot go to the top because there's not a ton to do. And from a player perspective, also not a ton to do. Moving on to Markarth. Now, scenery here, depending on the type of architecture you're into, can go either way. It's got a very industrial look to it, and probably going to be very unique compared to all the other holds. So if you're going for a architectural reason or a historical reason, then this place is going to be the absolute best source of all the places of Skyrim. If you're going for a beautiful outdoor scenery location, probably not going to really find what you're looking for unless you go outside the walls and kind of explore it out there. You can see the mountains, maybe some dwarven architecture on the outside, or sorry, Dwemer architecture on the outside. From an architectural standpoint, very solid, and as long as you don't venture too deep into the bad areas, your security is probably going to be okay. A little bit of like bandit-ish activity here. I mean, the second you walk in, someone's about to get freaking murdered, which you can stop, by the way. A lot of people don't know that. You can prevent that murder. But as a player, there's a lot to do here. There's a lot of different things you can do. There's the Molag Bal stuff. There's the going into the Dwemer Ruins stuff. There's the whole you getting sent to prison. There's all kinds of things to do here. So as a player, it's very engaging. A lot of different places to go here. A lot of people to talk to, a lot of activities to partake in. And as far as a destination, there's a lot to see here, and it's unique as far as the 9 holds go. I think you gotta put Markarth in the S tier. Maybe that's gonna be controversial. I can't say for sure, but I think it's a fair choice. Morthal. Again, weather's gonna come into question. And again, much like Dawnstar and Morthal are almost interchangeable in my eyes. There's not a lot to separate them, and there's not a whole lot more to do in either. And security risks are going to stay more or less the same in both, I think. Maybe you could make some like assessments based on the fact that one's got like kind of a port system and the other's got more of like an inland feel to it. But I honestly think they're both more or less interchangeable. So I think we're gonna kind of put them both in that same kind of tier. You know, Morthal. I might even I think I can elevate Morthal just based on the inland feel to. You know what? We're gonna do something here on the fly. Hold on. I'm going to make sure that I'm not mixing them up because they are so interchangeable to me. Morthal. Images, please. Let me look at you. No, I had them right. I had them fully correct. Yeah, in my estimation, Morthal is much, much better than Dawnstar, so never mind. After having taken a second to look at that, I didn't have them quite as mixed up. Now going back to here, maybe from a historical point, you want to go to that museum or whatever, and maybe you have an interest in ports, and you're just coming to Skyrim into there, and you're gonna stay there a night on your way to going somewhere else with your boat. I get it. C tier, staying there. Morthal. It's more inland, and honestly, the weather's probably not as awful. There's probably a couple months a year where it's acceptable to be in Morthal. And to be honest, you're probably completely safe. That has the guard barracks. It's going to feel very secure there. And to be honest, the architecture is kind of cool. Crossing bridges, going over the little creek and stuff like that. You know what? Morthal deserves to be in the B tier. Cold weather, though. If you're not a fan of it, it's going to be a problem for you. Moving on to our next hold is Riften. Now, from a scenery standpoint, particularly on the outside, there's a lot to like. There's a lot of tree coverage. There's mountains in the area. You know, this is where you're going to get your best fall time scenery. So if you're a big fan of watching the leaves change, take a stay out here, but make sure you're not always inside the walls because you're not really going to get as much of it inside the walls. Architecture is pretty cool. The little shopping bazaar is kind of nice as well. It's got a nice little aesthetic to it. But it's kind of seedy here. It's a little dangerous. You got the Thieves Guild here. You got a lot of sketchy underground activity. So as long as you stay quiet and stay to yourself, I think there's a lot to like about Riften. But inside the walls, it does kind of feel like a slum type of setup. It just doesn't feel modernized. Like the scenery outside is gonna save it, as well as the overall cool kind of area of like a Venice style little thing there in the middle with the bazaar and all that. And you know, cool little the bee and the barb, all that kind of stuff. There's some things to like on the interior side of Riften. And you're going to hear a lot of rumor mill here. This is where you're going to go if you're big into information and gossip. Riften's got all kinds of that going on. And a whole lot of people to talk to if you are into the shady side of things. But I think we're going to have to put Riften into the C tier as well, just because you're probably never going to feel safe here. I know that the Thieves Guild in general, maybe you're like, yeah, but they don't kill, they just take stuff. You don't want your stuff taken. Even if you don't feel like your life's at risk, you still feel unsafe because your stuff might get taken. That's not something that you want to have happen. Now, as a player, from a player's perspective, looking at Riften objectively, if you want to do the Thieves Guild, then there's a lot to like about this place. But if you're not particularly interested in it, like I usually am not, then there's nothing to do here except for if you run mods, this is where you're going to get Inigo, who is a Khajiit follower, one of the best mods in Skyrim history. If you haven't done Inigo and you do mods on your Skyrim playthroughs, highly recommend Inigo. He alone could elevate this into B tier, but we're going to pretend as though Inigo is not in existence. We're going to go ahead and put this into the Dawn Star range. Honestly, because of the weather and the fun trees, we're going to elevate it to B. It's average tier. It can't go higher because the inside isn't all that pretty to look at, and you might not feel safe while you're there. Moving on to our next hold, Solitude. Solitude is where you're going to stay if you got more money in your pockets. Solitude's got a lot of verticality to it, and it's very nice to look at from the outside because it's very like almost intimidating, but also majestic, like a Lion King kind of feel to it. It's probably gonna be kind of cold here, but you feel insulated by the walls, and you feel very safe. You got again the walls, and you've got a whole lot of coverage from like militaristic point of view. And it would be very fun to go on like a shopping adventure here. You've got your clothing store, you've got your Fletcher, you've got all kinds of nice stuff here and a lot of things to do. And again, if you're wealthy, this place is going to have a lot of fun things for you to do. You go to visit the Bard's College, go hang out, listen to some music. A lot of entertainment value here. You go to the palace, if you're really wanting to be a high roller, you go visit the palace. Honestly, I think it's kind of hard to beat this place. From a player perspective, kind of annoying to get in there maybe the first time, but once you're in there, you're going to feel a whole lot better, except for the part where you have to watch like an execution take place the second you come in. But that being said, you've also got the Blue Palace where you can do a whole lot of activities, some of them more enjoyable than others. I won't speak more on that. The Bard College is a little bit of a letdown, but I'm not going to go farther into detail about that, but they certainly aren't getting bonus points from a player perspective on the Bard College. But the shops are very good there, and there's a lot of things to like about it. And if you get the home there, pretty nice little house. Can't complain. Expensive, though. So, a high player perspective as well as a good vacation destination. I'm going to put it up pretty high. Now, again, like usual, these could be subject to change at the end of the video or as we see fit. For now, though, we're going to stick with what we've done here, and then we'll see at the end where we rank things based on where other things are. Moving on to Whiterun. Whiterun, for many players, we're going to start with player perspective this time. Probably the first hold that you went to your first time playing the game. Probably even currently one of the earlier holds you go to, because it's where you get access to a lot of different parts of the game. If you don't go here early, you're going to miss a lot of important stuff, and you're going to fall behind on the main quest, which I know. A lot of people don't play the main quest once they kind of get to a certain point of progression. But you need to get to the point where you've at least spoken to the Greybeards probably before you can really, really start branching off. Because you want dragons to spawn, and you want all of these things to be in the world. You kind of have to activate them through Whiterun. So Whiterun is kind of a very important hub, and it stays relevant the whole game, particularly in the Civil War arc, becomes very relevant. Dragons and whatnot, and it's kind of centralized in the map as well. So it's got a lot of good access to different things. If you're into the companions, also huge. One of the bigger towns overall as well. So there's not a lot you could dislike about it. There's a reason they want you to go to it first, because it's probably the best one they made from a player perspective. From a tourist's perspective, it's got the walls. It's got a very what's the location from Lord of the Rings? It's got that kind of a feel to it. With the elevated high walls and the high up like castle kind of feel to it. It feels very secure, and it is very secure. The only thing that could really do much to it is a dragon attack, which for the most part all of these holds are going to be in pretty big trouble if a dragon attacks, with the exception of maybe Markarth. Everywhere else is going to be kind of hard to stay safe. But from a player perspective as well as a staying perspective, it's got good weather. It's got good scenery, it has security, it has tons to do, it has reasonably priced real estate, Breeze Home being one of the nicest and cheaper options for staying somewhere. And the Jarl is pretty easy to get along with, for the most part. No one's really crazy there. You've got your guy, like you might get a little annoyed at the priest that kind of just talks at all times. You might get annoyed by that. You might get annoyed by Nazim asking if you've ever been to the Cloud District. Certain things are going to get to you. People are going to bother you. You got beggars, but beggars are in every town ever. You can't blame them for that. Some of the children are a little bothersome. Yeah, just let them play their games. Let them hang out. From a tourist perspective, it's got everything you could want. It's got a good shopping. It's got fresh produce, fresh meat, fresh goodness. It's got a couple of bars, a couple of places to hang out and have a drink. It's got the companions if you're interested in something a little bit on the wild side of things. It's got everything you could want. Whiterun's got to be S tier. Whiterun and Markarth, very different cities. You're going to notice a common element. Good weather, security, the walls. The walls being very important there. And, just good all around for the player and for the tourist. Nothing to dislike out of either, really, unless you don't like very rugged architecture that is Markarth. I could see someone else saying Markarth is C tier just because they don't like that style of architecture. Moving on to Windhelm. Now, Windhelm is going to be the place you're going to want to stay if you are a die-hard, I'm into the tough weather, but I also like the security of walls kind of thing. You're into like the roughing it with the tough guys kind of aesthetic. Like you got a lot of respect for powerful and loud people. You want to be in Windhelm with the other tough people. But from like a weather standpoint, again, it's cold. Again, it's not going to be that pleasant to live there for the most part. But you've got warm buildings and you've got the security again of more walls. You might be a little freaked out by the kid that's like, you're like the people that are kind of like sacrificing things and whatnot. But stay clear of it. Hey, it's just like any town. You stay clear of the weirdos and you might have a great time. You might find it to be your favorite place you've ever lived. Now, having said all of that, from a player's perspective, it's very important in the Civil War. If you're a Stormcloak sympathist, this place is going to be the place you're going to do a lot of your business. It's going to be where you do your war games planning. Where you're going to be with Ulfric. Ulfric Stormcloak. Powerful figure amongst the Skyrim community. But again, there's quite a bit of engagement here. It's where you get to actually go explore, fight some ice wraiths, come back, and then start your Civil War campaign. I understand that some people are going to take the side of the Imperials. Typically, I'm a Stormcloak guy myself. I'm sorry to say it. I know it's gonna. Some of you have probably already hit the exit button on this one, but hey, we made it pretty far before I had to make you pull the ripcord, so I'll allow it. Pro-Imperial, don't worry. I don't have anything against you, just your faction. It's okay. Now, having said that, if there was a way to kind of ride the fence on it, I would probably take that option most of the time, because I think both sides are flawed. And, I'm not going to get into the fact that that's very, very relevant to this day and age. But either way, a lot to do as a player, not a whole lot to do as a tourist, unless you're into roughing it, but still being safe while roughing it. I think we're going to have to go B tier with it just because of its importance to the player, as well as it does have a certain kind of, aura about it for a tourist perspective. I could see you wanting to go here. Moving on to our 9th and final hold. I was going to use the term last but not least, but I don't think that it's applicable in this case. Winterhold. Winterhold is perhaps the worst climate and the least real estate that is at least still in existence. You're not ever going to feel safe here because you got your frost trolls. You've got your people that hate the college that are going to try to come and you're probably going to get a lot of protesting here. The protesters are going to outnumber the population of the dang town. You're not going to want to stay in the cold unless you are like some kind of librarian or historian that's interested in the college. You're probably not going to have a whole lot to see here, and you're probably not going to be allowed anywhere near the college in the first place unless you're given some kind of special access that I don't know about. Maybe if you have a magical aptitude as a tourist in Skyrim, then perhaps you could go in there and learn a great deal of things about both magic and the world itself. But if you are not going to get into the college, which is going to be the case for most of you, I'm sorry, it's just the case. This isn't Harry Potter. You're not going to be a Slytherin in Skyrim, okay? You're probably not going to have anything to do. It's cold. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to see. There's like one little tavern, and that's just because there needs to be one. It's kind of a rule in Skyrim. It's, kind of like a Viking, like Nordic approach. You got to have your tavern. But the one shop gets no business, so they're probably going to have bad prices. Half the town is just gobbled up into the cold abyss below, so you don't really feel very confident in moving into a home there, even if there was an option, which really there isn't. It's as from a player perspective, if you're not really into the idea of the mages, probably not gonna be that engaging. Here's the biggest problem. You use your spell to get in, right? Which it some like a small barrier of entry there. Once you're in, you can become the archmage without doing diddly squat really as far as magic goes. You can be like a very, very weak wizard and be the archmage. Well, what's even the point? You're the archmage, but you got the weakest magic out of anyone there. Silly. Silly. And it's also kind of annoying having to sit there and cast your wards and all that nonsense. There's not, and then if you don't go to the college immediately, why are you even in Winterhold? It's just nothing. It's D tier, the absolute worst hold without debate. But now looking back at the list here, I've yet to have a tier list where the bottom half was heavier than the top half. So I'm pretty generous for the most part. So if you disagree with any of my low rankings, just keep in mind that I still am favorable in my rankings. Looking from the bottom again, we are not going to change Winterhold. We just spoke on it. It's just objectively the worst of the 9. And honestly doesn't have really any redeeming qualities unless you are some kind of historian or aspiring mage yourself. Moving up to the Dawnstar tier, the C tier, again, the lone inhabitant of its tier. I don't think that it's nearly as bad as Winterhold, so I can't see it going down, and it certainly isn't on the level of any of these 3 locations. The weather's not great, there's not much to do here. Again, the only reason that you would want to be here as a tourist is either if you're coming in and going out a day later, or if you are into the idea of the museum that isn't really all that impressive to begin with. That's about all you're going to get here. And then if you're into that cold weather, maybe, a one night stay, seeing how it really is to live in Skyrim, maybe that's the appeal that you get from it. That's about it though. Player perspective, not a whole lot to do here either. The museum. That's about it. Stays in the C tier. It's not going to move down because it can't even compete with the badness that is Winterhold. But moving up to the B tier, our heaviest, weightiest tier. The average group, your group that has its flaws and it has its pros, and they come out in the wash. You got Morthal. Again, architecturally kind of pretty. The weather might be a couple times of the year where it's a little bit pleasant. There's still not a whole lot to do there, so I can't really elevate it just based on the coolness factor and the potential decent weather at times. I can't elevate it because of anything, and I can't really downgrade it because it is objectively better than Dawnstar in every regard, though those two are the most comparable locations, I think, and they're also close together, so it makes sense. But it's not even close to me in comparison to these two. Going over to Riften, if we're going to compare it to Morthal, I think from a livable standpoint due to temperature, it's going to be a little bit better of a choice. If you're wanting to see the fall colors, probably also going to choose Riften. If you're interested in more of a actual city life, like security, like hey, maybe you're going to choose Riften again. And if you like shopping more, you're going to choose Riften. But there's something to be said about the more country aspects of Morthal that make it a little more favorable in that regard. But again, Riften can't go up because it's just not a safe place to live. And if you're not into the Thieves Guild as a player, then there's not much else you would really want to be here for besides Inigo. I can't really move it down because despite its flaws, it is still not going to be a cold mess that is Dawnstar. So it's fair as well. Moving over here to our Windhelm. It's got historical prowess. It has serious significance in the story as a player. But it's very cold, so you can't move it up. There's not a whole lot to do unless you are into the idea of going to visit the, well, Ulfric. I guess he is the High King, the true High King, depending on the route that you take. But really, there's not a whole lot of reason to come here, but it's nowhere near as unpleasant as Dawnstar. And that's what it comes down to here. Is it worse than its peers? I don't think so. Is it superior to its peers? I don't think so. I think among the 3 locations here, if you ask me to choose one to live in, I'm probably going to take Morthal. But it is close because it's the only one of the 3 here that has a little bit less security. But I still think it's pretty darn secure, and you get more access to nature directly here, as well as a little bit prettier outdoor scenery. Well, at least outdoor of your home. Outdoors beyond the walls of Riften, it's quite pretty. But you have to deal with a lot of issues inside. So I think the B tier is pretty secure in its positions as well. Moving up to the A tier, Falkreath. Again, weather is decent. The access to nature, being near mountains and trees, fall time weather is also probably going to be quite pretty here. You know, if you have some kind of an attachment to the dead, be it respectful or otherwise, I'm not going to judge what you're into. Falkreath's got a lot to offer from that standpoint, maybe historical issues as well that are worth looking into. But ultimately, once you get past all of that, it's just kind of a visually nice place to be. You're not going to find yourself going on particular shopping sprees or tourist attractions, really. It's just going to be about nature and getting out of the big city. This is going to be like your, getting away from the big towns, but also still being in civilization kind of place. Good weather and all that's going to elevate it above these. The weather's better here than any besides maybe Riften, but the environment's going to be much better. As far as things to do, it may be among the worst, but from a player perspective, it is pretty. Even as a player, looks are kind of important. And, doing the werewolf quest is pretty fun, really, once you get to do it. You might find yourself annoyed trying to talk to the guy through the jail cell, but we're not going to get into that. And again, if you're trying to grind out that achievement, it might be very important to speak to this particular guy and get that ring off his finger. But I think just the fact alone that it's pretty is going to elevate it above these. And the tourist part of it is going to keep it up here as well. It definitely cannot move up in my estimation because of the player perspective. If this was purely a tourist perspective, it would probably still just be here. It would have a better chance of elevating up. Going over here to our Solitude. Now, Solitude is not a poor man's destination. If you have a little bit of disposable income and you're coming over to Skyrim, it's highly recommended. It's got shopping, it's got music and entertainment, it's got royalty going over to the home of the original High King, Torig, all that fun stuff. You can come here and see a lot of historical sites, get a Lion King vibe. You're going to feel very secure here. High walls and a lot of guard presence. It's overall is going to be a very nice place to stay. Weather might be a little bit on the cold side, but you should have access to warmth via the bards and via all kinds of areas that you'll feel well at home in. As well as nice architecture overall and a good interior design philosophy. I think that it's in contention for S tier, but I cannot move it up there just because, the weather is cold. You're not maybe going to want to spend all your time outside. Moving up to the S tier, Markarth. Markarth and Solitude are probably the closest two that I could consider a swap on the whole list, and it's at the top, so it's worth debate for certain. But it depends on what kind of architecture you're into. You're going to feel safe here. Maybe it's like slightly seedier than Solitude. But here's the things that I think are good about it. Security from a dragon attack is the absolute highest here. I think Solitude is there as well. You know, honestly, I'm talking myself into it a little bit here. I think we're actually gonna make the swap. We are going to, and I don't think you can just move it up to S as well. I think we need to do a swap here because we don't want our S tier to be as heavy as our A tier. It just is, it's ludicrous. It's not how it works. You have to make a choice, and I think this is the correct one. Solitude moves up to S tier and dethrones Markarth. Now, let me tell you why I think that Markarth is not quite as good as Solitude. You heard quite a bit of it there. From a tourist perspective, Markarth's a little sketchier. You know, you might feel a little less secure there. Interior wise, you know, it's interesting to look at, but unless you are interested in the Dwemer aesthetic, you're probably going to get a little bit bored of it pretty quickly because there's not a whole lot more other types of architecture here. It's not very diverse. There's different sectors in Solitude. There's a lot of things to do. But again, if you don't have the money and the resources, maybe it's not quite as good. From a player perspective, both are very rich in things to do, and they both have their own unique little bonus areas with fun things to do as well. And we've got the faction here of the bards, which again is a slight disappointment if you wanted to play music and be super entertaining, but I do think the Solitude's going to get the nod at the end of the day. Looking over at our final S tier ranking, Whiterun. I think Whiterun is undisputedly the absolute top tier hold in Skyrim. It has good central location, so if you come here, you can go anywhere with a little bit of assistance. You're probably not going to want to hoof it like the Dragonborn does, so to speak. You're going to want to probably take a carriage. Fine, the prices are pretty reasonable. If you're coming to Skyrim, you probably got enough money to throw around at a carriage if you want to visit an hold. But here's the deal. It has a good centralized location. It has security from the walls. It has good weather. It has pleasing aesthetics. It has opportunities to shop. And it has historical presence. It has political presence. It's got everything you could want in it. There's nothing to say negatively about it besides maybe some of the inhabitants could be a little bothersome. The companions are going to add to your security feeling. Maybe you'll get a little freaked out by the whole werewolf thing. But they're there to protect you. They should make you feel good. They go out on hunting expeditions. Whenever you walk up to the town, if you come from the right angle, they're killing a giant out in the fields. They're protecting the farms. It's all very well protected out there, and the scenery around the town is great as well with the waterfalls and everything. From a tourist perspective, it's top tier. From a player perspective, it advances the story very nicely. It gives you access to dragons and the graybeards and nearby everywhere else. It makes it easy to navigate from Whiterun to pretty much anywhere on the map. It's just all around the top tier. There's nothing negative from a player perspective either, besides maybe a couple of these places don't have a load zone going into them. But you can't really use that as a good reason to give it a knock. You know, having to load into it's probably actually a good sign for the quality of what's inside. And honestly, the Jarl, you know, it's probably one of the easier places to become a Thane and get access to Lydia, which maybe a divisive topic. But, you know, Breeze Home is one of the nicer homes you get access to in the game. You can get access to a horse from here pretty easily. You have a lot of mod followers. A lot of them tend to be located in Whiterun just because it's kind of a hub. It's kind of important. A lot of places to shop there. Talk to Bellathor. You can talk to Nazim. You can talk to all kinds of fun faces there. Have a great old time. You've got access to an outdoor shrine, which is always nice. Get your diseases cured. A lot of things to like about this place, and not a lot of things to dislike besides Nazim. And he is worth disliking, I will tell you that. But, having said that, this is our list, our definitive list of the holds in Skyrim. Now, you may disagree with them, and if you do, please let me know down in the comments below and give me a good reason why you would move them to the tier you move them. If you have any other ideas for things I should look at in Skyrim, I would gladly do it. I've considered followers and things of the sort, but for now we're going to leave this here for Skyrim. We may revisit it at some point. Let me know what other tier lists you want to see down in the link and down in the comments below. Give me a like, subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of stuff. Until I see you guys again, thank you all for being here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.